with that, we have the Astro Weather, and I am your Astro Weatherman, Robert Phoenix. It is, as it always is, for the most part, 8 a.m. here, Central Standard Time. And we're finally getting some sunshine here. We've had about 4 or 5 days of mostly cloudy skies and precipitation, and the land here can certainly use it. And I hope that the weather, whether it's external or internal in your life, is more than fair. How about that? I welcome you all to the show. And if you're in another part of the world where it is not morning nor day, then I also wish you a very, very good evening. And we'll try to tailor some of our insights or connections here for you as well, so that you can spend your evening understanding what's going on in the inner sky. All right. Well, it's been a few days since we've done this, and it's just amazing how quickly things change. I mean, really, if we look at what's going on with, I need to do something just a little bit different here. Hold on one second. I need to, this is a bit of a different system, so I have to share the content a bit differently. So let's do this. There we go. Turn it into a tab. That's it. So the last time we did Astro Weather was last Thursday, and between then, I think it started uh, a bit last week, but we have now a lot of earth change stuff happening. If you're paying attention, we have things going on big time in Iceland. And Iceland is basically a country sitting on top of volcanoes. And this is how they have all of their hot springs. By the way, Iceland is on my bucket list. I want to go to Iceland one of these days. I need to experience the hot springs in Iceland with the Northern Lights. Doesn't that sound like a good bucket list item? Anyway, Iceland, hang in there. I've got to get there, so don't break up yet. We can't break up yet. Anyway, it's major because there are other points around the planet. You know, when you get beneath the skin of the planet and you get into like the skeletal system of the planet, and some people would say that's exactly what the planet is. It's one giant body. When you get into the skeletal system of the planet, you'll find that it's connected. So Iceland would be connected to what's going on in Italy, and what's going on in Italy would be connected to someplace going on in, say, the Canary Islands. The Canary Islands be connected to something that's going on in South America, and you wrap around South America and you come up the coast, and it's connected to what's happening on the west coast of South America. And then you come up the Ring of Fire and you bring in Japan, and there are things happening in Japan right now. The planet is kind of on fire, and it's on fire. It's really interesting to use that metaphor for being on fire because the populace in the planet is on fire too. It's fascinating to watch both what's happening internally and externally. You know, we have protests that are happening in Spain, very intense protests. We're going to get into that over on 15 minutes. Of course, the war that's erupted in the Middle East, if you call it much of a war, it doesn't seem like much of a war, at least on the surface, seems more like a pummeling versus a war. But it does represent the explosive nature that humans are experiencing. So as above, so below, right? We've got a lot of explosive energy going on right now. And how do we see that in the chart? Well, we're not going to see it in that chart because that's 1908. So I need to stop sharing that. Let me go back here. It's a good thing I'm paying attention. Were you paying attention? It's my Monday. Give me 1 second here. Let's do this. Let me do this. There we go. Let's edit this. All right. There we are. Let's throw in a few more little celestial goodies here. You don't like celestial goodies. Okay, here we go. All right. Yeah, we just came through yesterday that very intense over the weekend, that very intense eclipse. I'm sorry, not eclipse. The moon being in Scorpio. Right. It was super intense. I don't know if you felt it or not. All right, we're back on the case here. Let's do this. There we go. There we are. Old Eli caught it. So, if I had had a show on Saturday night, I would have, sorry, Sunday night, I would have talked about how this configuration of planets, all in Scorpio, and the sun rapidly catching up, right? We're almost there. We're what, uh, 3 days away from the Sun Mars conjunction. And the thing that made it intense over the weekend is that the moon was also in play, and there was a lot of really dark energy being whipped up there. You know how we're tested in terms of what we're capable of, or the ideas or thoughts that come into our head at times when uh, we are tempted to have them, right? I went through some of those thoughts over the weekend, and it was a real test for me to, how do I say this, not act on those thoughts, and to just chill out and just stay neutral, because I felt like that there would be some kind of psychic backlash. And the interesting thing is that sometimes you don't even have to do the things. Sometimes you can just think the things. And if you think them intensely enough, especially in Scorpio, the things will happen. I'll give you an example. This is an example. So uh I traveled this weekend, and I was in Arkansas for the weekend. I had a great time. It was so cool hanging out with a bunch of really interesting and what I would call switched on young people. Not even switched on the way that we would talk about it, but just kind of naturally switched on, right? Um, so I stopped in Austin on the way back, and I thought to myself, okay, I've got to be really careful. I have to be careful. What would happen if this was my last ride home? I had that thought in my head, and I've had experiences like this before. So as soon as I turned out onto this country road, it's 2 lanes, dark. Again, some rain, light rain, and I'm driving down this road, and the car in front of me is driving on the other side of the road, and it's not a 2 lane high. It's not a 2 lane road. It's a 1 lane road, and I'm watching this guy. I'm like, what the hell is going on here? And he must have driven, because there's nobody on the road. He must have driven about a quarter mile on the other side of the road. And I'm like, I gotta keep my eye on this dude. So eventually we come out of this road, and we hit the intersection to the main highway. and he's on it and I'm on it, and he's swerving. And then at a certain point in time, he actually gets into the shoulder of the road and starts driving down the shoulder of the road. And there is kind of a berm near the shoulder of the road. And I'm thinking, this guy's going to fucking flip his car. And, I was at a reasonable distance. But I was the first car in the pack, and there were some other cars behind me. And it was just a strange kind of moment in time where I had this thought about, well, what would happen if it's my last ride home? And all of a sudden I manifest, right, the potential reaper in this car the guy was clearly intoxicated. And to me, that was this kind of understand. Well, it was my personal understanding of the scorpionic energy in the moment. Like, I was aware of it. For some reason, I was aware of the ride home before it happened. Now, the question is, did I create the ride home? Or was I ahead of time with the ride home? And to me, this was the Scorpio moon. And I think part of it had to do with holding back on some thoughts and feelings that I had swirling in my head that day. I didn't do anything, right? But the dark clouds in my mind were there. We all get dark clouds. So we passed through this cycle of the moon. And, whenever we get into the new moon phase, it's a real reset. So if you're conscious about it, and if I would have talked about it on Sunday night, I would have brought this up. But I was actually living my astrology on Sunday night, which was very interesting. So now we've passed through the window of darkness, and we have the moon in Sagittarius today, and it's in a tight conjunction with the sun. Get ready, because people are not going to hold back today, as much as the holding back occurred over the weekend. At least for me, I don't know about for you, but at least for me, this is a very different energy. The Sagittarius is all about being authentic and not holding back. And we have the Moon Mercury conjunction, and people talk about Cazimi. I'm going to amplify the two. Mercury becomes emotional, right? But emotional in a way, a fiery way, a kind of a righteousness. And it's good and bad, because astrology is a neutral science if you really break it down. Now, I could look at this with Mercury, Moon, and Sagittarius. I could say, well, here come the Chosenites, right? Or here come the dispensationalists, or here come the extreme version of Islam. Sagittarius has that energy of being kind of holier than thou at times. You know what I mean? It's zealot-like energy. So it's in the air today. There's a kind of a zealotry in the air. And of course, we've got a square with Saturn. They're both separated. Tonight, as the moon moves deeper into Sagittarius, that effect will begin to wane. We'll still have the Mercury square to Saturn. And this is like a buildup. So what's interesting here is that if you instinctually were holding back over the weekend and dealing with your own darkness, hello, darkness, my old friend, the dam is about to bust here. I'm not sure if the Saturn can withstand the moon and Mercury in a mutable sign, right? We're talking mutable signs. We're going from fixed here to mutable. And it's like, okay, let's change something. Let's change our opinion. Let's change our stance. Let's change our outlook. But this is fiery. This is a very, very fiery conjunction. Now, this is a really interesting day. I guess right now, if we want to do the numbers, we got a 666 moment. If you're playing the angel numbers, your angel number for 8:15 in the morning Central Standard Time is 666. We have Venus at 6 Libra, the moon at 6 Sagittarius, Mercury at 6 Sagittarius. I love the sextile between Venus and Mercury. Hello. and we'll throw the moon in, but the moon again is very transient. But the Venus Mercury sextile today is all about justice for all, right? This is one of those moments in time where all of a sudden it's like, wow, look at this. Look at this. Motherfuckers caught red handed, right? This is the energy that we're dealing with today. And, I think, and I am not extolling the virtues of being a zealot. Nobody really likes zealots, to be honest with you, unless, of course, people are looking for a zealot in their life, in which case, if you're a zealot, good luck with that. But that said, I think people are completely fucking fed up with the status quo. We're seeing this just insane level of hypocrisy with what's going on in San Francisco and Newsom and then them essentially turning in the city back into the city that at least portions of it, not the entirety of it. It'll all be down by the convention center, the Moscone Convention Center, which is where I'm sure a lot of this is taking place. So it'll be south of Market. They'll clean up south of Market. They'll clean up the areas around all the major hotels, the Mark Hopkins. San Francisco's got some really the St. Francis. They'll clean up in those areas. But there are other areas, like if you go out to the Mission, they won't do it, right? But this is what they're doing with San Francisco. So we're seeing the hypocrisy. And even Newsom said, some people were saying, well, we just did this because of the conference and the arrival of Xi. He said, yeah, you're right. We did. I mean, he's being blatant and out in the open about it. And in a lot of ways, they're kind of mocking you, but it's not really going to work all that well. Today, there is a real sense of, again, what I would call injustice, Libra the scale, Sagittarius law. And it feels to me like if you wanted to have a reasonable, rational, and authentic discourse today, if you're willing to push through a little bit with that square, right, with that Mercury square, with that moon square, not only that, but we have Sun Mars also moving into square with Saturn. The institutions are taking a hit. The Abrahamic religions are taking a hit right now with Saturn and Pisces and all their crazy end time scenarios and all the reasons why a certain piece of real estate should be in existence and look a certain way, and why a certain group believes they're the chosen ones and why another group believes that they have the right answers to faith, right? It's all coming to a head right here. It's all coming to a head. And as the Sun and Mars move closer into square with Saturn, especially when we get that Sun-Mars conjunction, look out. Look out. It's the walls come tumbling down. Venus is in a trine with Pluto. It's an interesting trine, right? It's been there for a while, and it's going to start to move out of that trine. So these are relationship contracts that are binding, right? If you want to set new agreements with people, today is a good day. Today is a very, very good day. The moon's still in the new phase, and the Mercury moon conjunction has a lot of passion, has a lot of fire and fairness. I think there's fairness. I mean, I think that's all we're really looking for is a fair shake, right? And I think if you're interacting with people and you are in some form of conflict or loggerheads, don't be, I would say don't be afraid of confrontation. This is one of those days where not to be afraid of confrontation, but start from the place that your position, this is what you have to eke out here, that your position is the one that's the most fair. So it means you have to work through everything, right? You have to work through your side, their side, maybe a third person side. You have to work through it all. You have to be scrupulous. You have to be scrupulous with your honesty, because that's how Sagittarius at its best really rolls. It's a scrupulous sign. Unscrupulousness does not really pay off today. So if you're able to really own that, you'll be able to drive any negotiation today, whatever that is, right? But you have to get to the place first, map it out first, and understand what's fair. And then you lead people to the conclusions of what is fair. And you do that by asking questions. Always. You always ask questions. Always. If you ask the right questions, you will lead people down to the place you want to meet them. But you just have to listen and pay attention and ask the right questions. Um, we do have some trine energy going on. Mars trine Neptune, Sun trine Neptune. And that's creative. So there's creative potential today. With your energy, how you marshal your energy. Wherever the sun is in your chart, right? It has to peak out somewhere. That's where Neptune is. So it's got to peak out somewhere. It's got to have a point of release, and that's where you want to be creative. It's in that area. And it will be continuing to be in that relationship for the next 8 days, 9 days, even when the sun goes into Sagittarius. It'll still be in a wide trine with Neptune and Pisces. And that's going to be weird. Maybe good weird. Maybe we'll get a little good weird during that time. We'll talk about that the closer we get to it. Here we go. True note, getting within hailing distance of Chiron. Maybe people will become aware of the tragedy of war. It's very interesting watching. Do you know who's really anti-war? The millennials. The millennials are anti-war. This is what I'm sensing. And I'm not talking about Ben Shapiro, okay, or Dave Rubin, but they're both millennials. Although Dave Rubin might be Gen X. I think Ben Shapiro is definitely millennial. The millennials are anti-war, right? And so we're seeing this resurgence of an anti-war movement. And I think people are becoming aware of the absolute barbarity of war, not only the barbarity of it, but what happens afterwards. It's not just the carnage and the loss of life. Who was I was watching? Maybe it was somebody on Jimmy Dore. I forget where I saw it, but there was a woman who she was in Gaza. She was being interviewed. And she was telling her kids that for a long time, don't worry, we'll get through this. Don't worry, we'll get through this. And then her message to her kids changed. And her message to her kids was, don't worry, we're all together. And the gist of that message is that if something happens to us, at least it'll happen to all of us. And when people hear that, it changes them. It changes them. There's the image of the young girl buried under the rubble, and they're trying to free her, and you can just see her hand in the air from beneath the rubble of Gaza in a fist, and it's just such a powerful image. It is the image of the human spirit, the spirit that's infused with the holy and divine spirit of the Most High, right, and God, right. That's how that happens. You can't do that alone. And we're seeing this, and it's this true note Chiron conjunction. It's making us aware more than ever of what's taking place in that sphere, in that realm. Of course, we're being bombarded by new commercials where they want to make sure that the American youth, especially the American youth of a particular color, class, persuasion, are really excited about going to war, right? So the more war marketing is up as well. We could really talk about the displacement with what's going on with the Earth here, with Uranus opposing the Sun and Mars opposing. This is all earthquake energy. Uranus and Taurus, and Uranus has been retrograde for a while, And I'm just wondering what's going to happen when it moves forward. Is there going to be like a really intense release when it comes to the Earth? It almost feels like there's just kind of recoiling effect. And, our consciousness is linked to everything, the earth, the sun, water, everything. So, this restlessness and instability that we've been experiencing on a global level, of course, it would have an impact on what's happening beneath us and even above us. Are we in the CME territory? Is this the day where we're going to have that like really major what they call world class CME? I think it's today or tomorrow. Keep an eye on that for sure because the sun and the earth are definitely connected in terms of what happens above and below the earth. So just keep an eye on some of these massive earth changes today. It's a very interesting day. Very, very interesting day. And even the inconjuncts are interesting. We come of an inconjunct with Jupiter, coming with Venus and Moon and Mercury. And again, Jupiter, the ruler of Sagittarius, and then the retrograde. And to me, this is economic. To me, this is, the price of things is just so fucking insane. It's insane how much things cost. People are paying, $15 for a freaking Happy Meal at McDonald's. Not that I go there, but I've been reading it. That's just not sustainable. It's not. And I think people, you're gonna start to see this here. This is all about the economy, and even people looking at the future of housing. Very precarious point, and people have had enough. They're fed up, especially when they find out how much so-called migrants and refugees get and how they're covered. It's not going to be pretty. Not going to be pretty. All right. Why don't we go to our star of the day, our True Hemp Science star of the day? Let's see. All right, I got to do the same thing. Let's do this. Some very interesting characters today. Let me get my banner up. I love my banner. So today's True Hemp Science star of the day is one Joseph McCarthy. Joe McCarthy, Tail Gunner Joe, as they called him back in the day, was born on November 14th, 1908 at 3 p.m. in Grand Chute, Wisconsin. Before I get into the legacy of Tail Gunner Joe and why his chart is important, I want to talk to you about True Hemp Science, which is your number one stop for all things CBD. They've got some of the best CBD edibles that you'll ever run across. They're tinctures, whether they're oil-based, water-based, alcohol-based, water-based, or spagyrics. Fantastic stuff. And they also have things like salves and balms that you can apply to you externally. And there's a bunch of other stuff there. All you got to do is spend $100 or more and type in 15MINS, 15MINS. That's all at the bottom on the crawl. 15MINS. And you'll get free product with your order. That means you're going to get a little goodie bag with a bunch of stuff that you get to sample. Not only that, but if you spend $150 or more, you'll get free shipping. And I know this for a fact. If you're a return customer and you have some contact with Chris, and a lot of people have, because you can go there, make an appointment to talk to him, those goodie bags get a little bit bigger. A little bit bigger. So there's a reward on top of reward. And I know there are people in that chat that can vouch for that. So even though there's not a rewards program, there is a loyalty program. It's a loyalty program without a code or without a card. So there you go. It's about as mainstream as it gets. TrueHempScience.com. All right, let's talk about our True Hemp Science star of the day. Tail Gunner Joe. Of course, Joe McCarthy was the guy who was in charge of the House Committee of Ethics and Foreign Affairs, also known as the Kefauver Committee, because it was Estes Kefauver who headed it up. And before we get into that part of Joe McCarthy's life, let's talk about the roots of Joe McCarthy. A very interesting character. He grew up on a farm in Wisconsin, and he dropped out of school when he was in middle school to help on the farm. So Joe McCarthy did not go to high school. He enrolled in high school at the age of 20, and he passed high school, I believe, in 1 year. So he got his high school degree at the, that speaks to a certain character, doesn't it? In a lot of ways, that somebody would not be ashamed to attend school with 14-year-olds. And then from there, he went to Marquette University, which is a Jesuit school. He went to Marquette, studied law, worked for a law firm, and then Joe McCarthy becomes a judge. This is all prior to World War II and prior to being elected as a congressman. So he was a judge. He went from working on a farm to going to high school at 20, getting a law degree, working for a law firm, becoming a judge. And what's fascinating about McCarthy is his relationship. He's got that South Node in Sagittarius. And what's interesting about that, especially in the ninth house, which is law, this is where we're going to get into a conversation about what the South Node brings to you in this lifetime. So for McCarthy, it gave him access to law. He understood it, right? It was something that was in his celestial DNA. If you want to talk past life, that's where he was. He's been there. He did it. He was able to just move right into it, right? This is how the South Node works. And he became a judge. And what he did is there was such a huge backlog in court cases with this one judge who had preceded him that he burned through the docket. And he did it in a very expeditious fashion. Where do we see this? It's Jupiter in Virgo in the sixth house. Big sixth house. Jupiter in Virgo is in its detriment. But that said, Jupiter's the ruler of the ninth, represents law, and he has a trine with Jupiter and Uranus in his chart. People that have the Jupiter-Uranus trine have a touch of genius in their chart, and they're able to think outside the box. And he was able to figure out how to move on these cases very quickly. Apparently, he used very concise briefs from the opposing, and a lot of this was in, believe it or not, a lot of this was in marriage and family. There were people getting divorces back. I mean, it's not like divorce is a new thing. You just had to work harder to get a divorce. And McCarthy would almost always side with the children and the best scenario for the children, whatever that was. And sometimes I think it would be the mother, or sometimes it would be the father. That's how he adjudicated a lot of this stuff, right? So he was very, very good at it. But then again, with Uranus in the 10th house, what does he do? He could have stayed out of the war, but no, he goes into World War II. He volunteers and he becomes mostly an observer on these bombers. And these bombers that would go out over the South Pacific. And I think one time they got him in, one of those bubbles at the bottom of the bomber where you had a machine gun. I think they had him fire at a stand of coconuts or something. It wasn't that he had stolen valor or anything like that, but because he went on a number of raids, he didn't really do anything. Now, what's really interesting is that people don't take into account that he could have been fucking killed on that plane. Doesn't matter whether he was dropping the bomb or firing a machine gun, that plane could have gone down. So it's not like he was sitting behind a typewriter somewhere in, fucking Honolulu, writing press releases for how great the war was going. What's interesting about his chart is Mars. And he has Mars in Libra. And he's an Aries rising. And he's got Saturn in Aries. in the 12th house. And, he's just always going to kind of stand out in a weird way, right? That's Saturn in the 12th house. People do not feel really at home with Saturn in the 12th house. And they feel like they're really not part of this world in some ways. And so if we look at planets, really key planets in this chart, he's got Uranus conjunct in midheaven. He's going to be kind of rebellious. He's got Saturn in the 12th, and he's got Pluto in the third. So there's these massive outer planets that are, and even Neptune in the fourth. All these outer planets are, in a lot of ways, are really determining the course of his life. We get into the conversation of destiny and fate here. Aries rising, he's going to be somebody who will just keep going, right? And, the thing that McCarthy was known for was the Red Scare. And Aries, of course, is the color red and blood and ramming ahead. So he was put in this position and given quite a bit of power. But there was a plan with McCarthy. The plan was that they would expose communism. And he was about as anti-communist as you can get. They would expose communism for a minute. They would use somebody like McCarthy, and you could see the square with Neptune, right, with Mars and with Venus. Like, we'll get into that. Now, they didn't sit down and look at this chart, but they said, we're going to exploit this guy's weakness. And what they did is they ran this thing up. They exposed some people. And then McCarthy really began to get some wind behind his sails, and he wanted to go deeper and deeper. He wanted to get into the army, right? He was starting to talk about homosexuality in the army. And that's when things started to get intense for McCarthy, right? That's when they started to go after him. Now, he is a very unusual partner in all of this. His partner, his legal counsel, was Trump's teacher, Roy Cohn. So there's a weird 6 degree of separation between Donald Trump and Joe McCarthy. And you can even hear it in Trump at times. Trump is kind of a modern day Joe McCarthy in a lot of ways. And some of that has to do with the association with Roy Cohn. And when he was on, right, with that Mars and Libra, again, that's adjudication. And he's got that Mars Pluto trine in his chart. I mean, look out, if he'd be like a hound dog that hadn't learned how to let go of the prey. He'd be like a fucking pit bull with that Mars Pluto trine. And he was very good at what he did, but then they started to set him up. And then the entire United States Senate turned on him, and he was censured. And by the time, and this all happens very quickly in his life, really from about the time of 52 to about the age of, I think he started to really get into this around 50, right? Chiron return. He really gets into it with his Chiron return. By the way, that's where my Chiron is, Aquarius. And at that point, he's all in it. He's just going for it. He's doing his Chiron mission. And he's got a grand trine, right, with Chiron and Mars, Venus, Pluto. And all this is happening in the media, too. It's happening on radio. It's happening even on TV. Like, TV is starting to break around this time. And, we have film of McCarthy. So it's, his Chiron is out in the world. But then they go after him and they censure him. And once they censure him, because this is too, we're just going to let the cat out of the bag a little bit. And then what we're going to do is we're going to kill the messenger. And after he was censured, he was still senator, but nobody would listen to any of his bills or anything that he was either supporting or offering up dissent to in the Senate. Nobody would listen to him. Nobody would show up. He was shunned. He was absolutely shunned. And then he began to drink excessively. And you have this Neptune square. I've talked about this many times, the Neptune square with Mars. And the Neptune square with Mars really results in addiction. And what's also fascinating is that there was I believe, an army surgeon or an army doctor who at first did not want to um, give morphine to McCarthy, but then he did. So McCarthy not only had an alcohol issue, he also had a morphine addiction, and he was dead by 57. And his legacy is really tattered. And nobody ever wanted to be associated with outing communism after Joe McCarthy. It was a total limited hang, frame up, set up job. We have the term McCarthyism now, and that was so fresh. I did a reading for a guy back in Pennsylvania, I think around 2018, maybe 2019, I forget. And I started to talk about some of this, not him specifically, but I started to make some kind of connection with his chart. I think maybe a country he was going to. He goes, "Oh, that's just McCarthyism stuff." Right. So and he was around for that, but even around this time, this idea that McCarthy was a bad word. McCarthyism was a bad word. If you got that label, you were a crank, you were unhinged, you were a conspiracy theorist, and not only that, but look at what happened to him. Theoretically, it drove him mad and insane. It was a great limited hang. They found the guy who would be the fall guy for the psyop, right? And I think McCarthy certainly had some demons. And once he felt defeated with that Mars square with Neptune, and then the support with the Venus square with Neptune evaporated for him. Yeah, he was kind of an empty husk, but a very interesting chart, and not a chart without some power. That Pluto Mars trine is just a dogged determination, and that Chiron and Aquarius, the willingness to be in the world and to say things that made people uncomfortable. He's got that moon in Leo, so there was a part of him I think that it did enjoy some of the popularity, some of the spotlight, but again, it sort of gets diminished. Mercury in Scorpio, deep, intense researcher. The sun, he'll just throw himself out there. Very fascinating chart, and a very important person in the sort of the historical legacy of the United States, and a key figure in advancing socialism and communism. Not because he took it on, but because of his ignominious fall. Joe McCarthy, your star of the day. All right. And that brings us to the end of the show. Thank you for being here. We'll be over on Rumble today. And good news on the website side of things. I'm in negotiation with somebody. In fact, we're not in negotiation. He's agreed to work on the site, firewall it. Now I just have to piece it back together. So time. We'll be back over on 15 minutes before we know. I pay too much for Boxcast and not use it. So hang in there. We'll be back there soon. In the meantime, please join us on Rumble. And be sure to hit the like button. That's real important here in this part of the world. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. We do this basically Tuesday through Friday, and you get a dose of the Astro Weather. If you feel like you want to buy me a cup of coffee, that link is in there as well. And for everybody that has bought me a cup of coffee or multiple cups of coffee, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for your generosity. In the meantime, use your head in order to discern what's real, your heart to set what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. Have yourself a wonderful day and night. Bye for now.